quick intro and imagine some more attendees will start trickling in. Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone so much for joining this evening's webinar. Appreciate people taking the time out of their evenings to attend, and for speakers taking the time out to speak. We've got a great lineup of speakers this evening, and yeah, really looking forward to the discussion. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Katya Kowalski, and I'm head of operations at VoltFast, and we're an advocacy and communications organization operating in the legal cannabis sector in the UK. And this evening's discussion is going to focus on the UK medical cannabis patient journey and the experience of patients currently. We've got representation from patients themselves, an independent cultivator, and an independent clinician to provide a variety of perspectives. And this evening, we're going to discuss what some of those key issues are that patients are facing momentarily, what solutions can look like, and how the industry and clinicians can play a role in addressing them. And as many of you know, and will appreciate, the patient experience in the UK can be challenging. Stigma is still a huge issue alongside cost, product choice, and holistic clinician-patient care. But all of these things are slowly changing. The competitive market's continuing to expand, and patients are being offered a wider variety of medications, choices, and product models, and quality of care is improving. So hopefully tonight's discussion will provide some food for thought and clarity around what should be done to improve the patient experience. And I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. So joined with me today, I've got Kieran Hayes and Sarah Eggleston from the Medical Cannabis Patients Association, or the MCPA. And they'll be able to comment on the lived experiences of patients and the many challenges that patients are experiencing in accessing medication and the role that patient groups can play in navigating this. I've also got Mikkel Zolman, who's the founder and CEO of MedCan, an independent cultivator for medical cannabis with a facility in South Africa. And Mikkel will be able to comment on some of the challenges of increasing awareness of cannabis-based medicines and some of the challenges of not being a first-line cultivator in the UK. And last but not least, I've got Dr. Ilan Lieberman, who's a pain medicine consultant and prescriber of medical cannabis through Script Assist, which is a tech platform supporting digital prescribing for independent doctors. And Ilan will be able to provide some insight into what prescribing doctors are witnessing in terms of the patient experience and what barriers they've overcome. So the format for today's webinar is going to be around 20 minutes of panelist discussion, 40 minutes of panelist discussion and 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. And we'll finish up at 7, and I promise we'll finish on time, because I know how annoying it is when webinars run past the time they've been told. And the first part of the webinar is going to be focused on the issues at play for patients at the moment. And then towards the end of the discussion, we'll move on to what we can do about this and what solutions look like. So if you have any questions throughout the discussion, feel free to type them in the Q&A function, and we'll allocate time to answer them at the end. So as things pop up, feel free to type it in the Q&A function, and we'll address it towards the end of the webinar. And if there's a specific panelist you'd like to ask a question to, just mention that in your comments as well. But yeah, so that's housekeeping and the intro all done. So I think without further ado, let's get started. So to kick things off, Sarah and Kieran, I think it'd be great to hear from you both around, given your patient network at the MCPA. It'd be great to hear what the main challenges facing patients are at the moment. What are you guys hearing through the Discord and through your network? What are some of the current tension points and topics that continue to come up for patients in the UK?
Do you want me to take that one, Kieran, to start off? We asked like a few different patients on the Discord and gathered what is the main issues that are going on at the moment. And one of the main issues that we're having is the vertical supply chain issues and difficulties with patients obtaining their prescribed medication. That's one of our main issues at the moment, but there is a lot of other issues as well. Like, one of my main issues is to do with the quality of flower that patients get and the lack of recourse that we have, if things aren't up to standards, and I think that's the main thing that we're run up against constantly is people saying, you know, I'm paying so much money for this. I'm being told that it's so expensive because it's tested for X, Y, and Z. But then, you know, I can't look at the COAs and I'm not sure if it's safe. And then, you know, if there is an issue with it, you go up to the pharmacy and they just tell you to get lost, basically. So there's just no recourse for patients. And that's one of the main issues we have constantly, isn't it, Kieran?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, additionally, there's the issue of stigma that I'm sure we'll touch on all these issues tonight, but the issue of stigma that patients face, whether that's potentially a doctor not maybe not being completely familiar with cannabis, or they've said something that, you know, is uh, you know, there's patients who deal with issues of addiction and stuff, and that comes up quite a lot. And potentially the question of asking for how much you need as a patient, and you know, a lot of stigma that's tied to, you know, patients that need more than others. So that's another one that definitely comes up.
Yeah, I have that one as well because I'm prescribed 100 grams a month. And since, you know, my becoming a patient, it has been, you know, I've faced nothing but stigma from, you know, clinicians, even other people, other patients in the medical cannabis industry. And I've had to really fight, you know, to get my 100 grams a month and keep at it, you know.
Yeah, it's something I've had to learn myself. You know, me and Sarah come from a little different backgrounds in the sense that, you know, my journey consisted mostly of, I had tried everything on the NHS and every treatment that was available to me, you know, therapies and such. And I had not had very much experience with cannabis before becoming a patient, and it's a lot of stuff that I had to kind of learn myself and come to terms with, and you know, and letting go of some of that stigma, you know, for yourself as a patient.
Yeah, there's still a lot of stigma. You know, like I said, even with patients, and it's we're just battling so hard just to say. I mean, it's like we came across it the other day, and it was like safeguarding issues. Like one patient was saying, you know, I can't have X amount prescribed a month because they said, you know, it's too much, and I'm going to be addicted to it. But on the flip side, they're happy for you to be on X amount of diazepam a day, you know, instead. And it's like, which is the one that's the harm reduction option? It's the cannabis, you know, in my mind. Like for myself, before I was on medical cannabis, I was on 50 milligrams of diazepam a day. So my argument was, would you rather I be on 50 milligrams of diazepam a day or 100 milligrams of cannabis a month? And I know exactly which one I'd choose on that one. And then another one of the issues that we face is clinics prescribing their own products, not allowing you know, other products to be prescribed through their pharmacy. Or, you know, I've encountered it recently, them putting people off by saying it'll take a week to order this in. Are you sure you want it? You know, and it's a sly way of putting people off, but it's all these little things that go on, and it just makes it difficult for me to access the exact medication I want. If I look online on, say, MedBud, and I see a strain like possibly one that Meg can have, and I think that will work really well for me because it's got X terpenes in it, I would really struggle to get that strain, you know, at a specific clinic. It's only like certain clinics you can get that at, and it shouldn't be like that. It's like there's a glass ceiling in a lot of places, and it's like, well, would you not prefer this because this is our brand, you know? And it's a lot of stuff that goes on, and people who are new to cannabis, like who don't know what works for them, will just try anything. And you know, a lot of trust goes in these doctors, and sometimes you don't know if they're prescribing what is right for the patient or what will make them the most money.
Yeah, and I think those are all really good points, Sarah, especially I think around the kind of the difference in experience perhaps for cannabis naive and cannabis experienced patients around that product choice. Because yeah, I think patients that have been in the sector and understand the medicine with, you know, a great deal of expertise, they're you know, that patient choice element is going to be really important. Whereas for other patients, perhaps it's not as an important of a factor, and they're just, you know, looking to finally, you know, try something that works. So I think that's a really really good point. Yeah, I think that the points you've mentioned around product choice and some of the issues with vertical supply chains, yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it would be interesting to hear your kind of take on this, Mikkel. And from an industry perspective, are we kind of doing enough to educate and support that side of the patient journey? And yeah, as an independent cultivator, are there some tension points that you can talk about or that you've experienced kind of between the industry and the patients?
Yeah, so I can talk to the my name is Mikhail. Thanks, Katja, for introducing me. I run, and I'm one of the founders of MedCan. So we're a fully indoor, fully licensed cultivation facility. We're based in Johannesburg. We've started this what feels like decades ago, but it's dog years, decades. But we've really been active in the UK since for the last 3-4 years now. So I can say that the market's definitely come a long way, and there have been a lot of improvements since I remember when we first launched our product. But I do think that we still have a lot of improvements to make. Speaking to Sarah's point about, from a patient point of view, the pharmacy telling you that it's going to take days to order this product in and trying to put you off is something that pains me to hear, because I can tell you as an independent cultivator, and for everyone listening, what that basically means is we're independently owned. We're not owned by any clinic, any pharmacy, any importer. We're doing this all as an independent. And so that means that we have to kind of get our product into all the different clinics, all the different pharmacies, and in front of patients ourselves. And so we've approached these different pharmacies that Sarah's speaking about, and none of them want to hold the stock, because for them it's a business risk, which you can kind of appreciate that. There is an expiry on this thing, the medical cannabis. And so it is sort of an element of, okay, do I want to hold this? Is there some sort of risk? But on the flip side, I do think that a lot of these pharmacies or clinics will choose which products they want to hold stock on, and those products often may or may not be associated to the brand, let's say. And so the challenge that we have as MedCan is ensuring that when Sarah, as a patient, hears this, that we know about it. And so one thing that MedCan's really tried to do over the last few years is really engage with the patient community, because we know that there's no other way for us to be able to sort of deal with the issues that Sarah and Kieran mentioned without actually knowing and hearing it from the patient almost immediately. So we've got a person whose full-time job basically is to spend time on the Discord, to spend time on the Reddit, and just engage with the patients, get the feedback, and try to do things and try to make things better. And I think that feedback loop is super important. And I do think that as a company, we have been able to, at certain times, been able to help. For example, discrepancies in prices, and no fault of anyone's, just not having the information, and being able to then sort of call up the pharmacy or call up the clinic from our point of view and say, hey, there's a patient, they want this. And only because the patient told us, like, immediately. And I think, again, like, not being active in any of those social channels would have been very disappointing. We wouldn't have been able to do it, let's say. And then just another example is, when we first launched our product 3 years ago, a lot of patients complained, this is a silly example, but they complained about the trimming. And so we really took that on board, and they complained on Reddit, we saw it, and we changed the way that we trimmed the flower. We moved from machine trimming to hand trimming only, exclusively. So that feedback loop is really important, but there are still, without that feedback, we wouldn't be able to sort of improve and do the things that we're doing. But there's definitely, as an independent, again, there's definitely the challenge of, okay, Sarah or Kieran are with a specific clinic, they want our product, but that pharmacy that's associated to that clinic either doesn't have us on their formulary or will not stock us and will order it in. And so Sarah's experience of MedCan is that it takes 10 days to get to her door, and so she perhaps doesn't want to order MedCan again, but that's not the case. The case is the product's there. It's just that the behind the scenes logistics haven't been either figured out, or, there's different motives and different, agendas, let's say. And so, again, we're an independent, we're willing to work with anyone and anyone. And so our goal has and always will be, if there's a patient that wants our product, we'll try to get it to them. So that's our role, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, and I think it's incredibly frustrating, because there's obviously so many steps from cultivation to get from seed to patient, essentially. And if you don't kind of understand that process intricately, I think it's it's very easy for patients to be frustrated, like, oh, why can't I get this product, or why is this delayed, or why are these issues? And when, like Sarah mentioned, when you receive a product that you're not happy with the quality of, and there's issues with it, it's almost like trying to figure out who you go after and who you kind of blame in many ways, or where it's gone wrong in the supply chain. So yeah, I think it's fantastic that you're doing that work to try and engage directly with the patient community, and and make patients aware of what your process is and what your role is. Yeah, but I was gonna
It definitely
yeah.
comes with challenges. Like, I think I've mentioned this in the past, but we've attempted to do a journey on our Instagram page of following a plant from the beginning to the end, in order to give patients oversight. Unfortunately, we didn't look at Meta's policies prior to that, and so posting anything cannabis related on Instagram or Facebook is going to get you shadow banned. So the reach is not so easy, but there. But other than that, yeah, we do want to make it is an industry at the end of the day, and I think it's a commercially driven industry. And so as much as we want to make things transparent and accessible and provide all the information, there is still that element of, okay, these are businesses, and they need to pay the bills, and people need to sort of act according to their business plans, and you're not going to know everything about it. But as a cultivator, as an independent cultivator, we're trying to be there for the patient as much as possible. So if you're a patient and you've experienced the problem, reach out to us. The best way is on the Discord or on the Reddit, and we try to get back to you as quickly as possible and investigate. And we take all the feedback quite seriously. So
yeah, so yeah, the patients that are watching and listening, yeah, you can definitely get in touch with Mikhail directly, and I'm sure that Sarah and Kieran can kind of pass on these messages through the MCPA Discord as well. But I just wanted to jump back to something that you mentioned, Kieran and Sarah, around kind of stigma. I feel like we didn't really go into enough. I mean, I feel like we probably won't have enough time to go through all the all the challenges with patients. But I thought stigma would be an interesting one just to elaborate on a little bit more, Kieran. And then yeah, I think after you, Kieran, it'd be great to hear from Ilan around patient stigma and kind of what role the clinician can play in trying to mitigate against that, and and kind of build more acceptance in the medical community around cannabis patients. But yeah, Kieran, if you want to talk more about stigma.
Definitely. Yeah, it's something I've personally faced. I've heard a lot of patients face it. If we're talking there's I would say, obviously, you've got to divide it into the private specialists, the clinicians that are prescribing, and then the NHS doctors. If we're talking private clinicians, I myself, I've had numerous doctors categorically tell me before that, if I prescribe you high THC products, you are going to become addicted to cannabis and you may develop psychosis. And there's a lot of fear still around cannabis, and I understand that obviously doctors are just going off of the current information, the current research we've got, and obviously we still desperately need more of that. But I worry that some patients who have come off of other harmful substances like myself to cannabis may be put off when some of the myths that still exist, that I still hear out there, I think really do need to be challenged within the medical cannabis community. When it comes to the NHS, the public sector care, I would say there's still an absolute ton of discrimination and stigma that comes there. For example, I couldn't access mental health services when I first came onto medical cannabis, because a lot of them would just deem it as an illegal substance and not any kind of medicine that could be prescribed legally. And then obviously, doctors will still mark it down as some form of substance abuse or addiction or some kind of dependence on a drug, when you wouldn't say that for any other kind of medication that they gave me for the past 12 years. So a lot of it really needs to change. We're at a point now where it's been 5 years, and this is a medicine, and frankly, the public sector needs to get on board, but we've still got a little bit of catching up to do, I say, in the private sector.
Yeah, I think I mean, from my report known and knowns that we published like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I'm losing track of time, but I think stigma was one of the biggest kind of barriers within the clinical community. There's obviously still, you know, an emerging but limited evidence base, depending on what condition you're looking at prescribing cannabis for. But you know, that's also due to the fact that, you know, we've had decades of prohibition, and only over the last kind of few decades have we seen medical cannabis become legalized and used in kind of routinely in several jurisdictions. So I think that evidence base will grow. But I think stigma, particularly in the UK, I think is particularly high. Whereas, you know, Israel, Canada, Australia, states in the US are taking up medical cannabis prescribing a lot more. Not to say that, you know, there's no stigma whatsoever, but I do feel like there's almost like a inherently British thing around being against cannabis. But yeah, Ilan, do you have any thoughts around stigma in the medical community? You're obviously a pain consultant, and you're, you know, embracing medical cannabis. I think you know, you see a lot of the benefits around cannabis-based medicine. So yeah, what's your kind of journey been like? Yeah, what sort of tension points do you feel like you've experienced or that you still see in the medical community?
So there were a couple of things that came up. So thanks a lot for everyone for their contributions. It's been very interesting. The first thing to say is that, and I can only speak for myself here and speak for what I understand to be the law. So doctors can't be incentivized to prescribe medication. It's illegal in the UK. So if a doctor is making a choice about a prescription based on how much is worth to their pocket, they are acting outside the GMC guidance for good medical practice. So when you see someone in clinic or online and they recommend something, it's illegal for them to have, you know, effectively a brown envelope for making that prescription. And I think that's really important to have as a facet of knowledge in your head. That's the first thing to address. So hopefully in the UK, when you're seeing a clinician who says, I think you need X, Y, or Z, then that decision is not made, it should not be based on how much it's worth to them. In terms of stigma, I think there is a lot of stigma out there, and I can only apologise for what might be described as ignorance in my colleagues. So I don't think it's intentional stigma. I think it is a sin of omission rather than commission. I think they don't know what they don't know. And there is a great deal of education that needs to be put in place for people to understand both the benefits and the risks of medical cannabis. And absolutely those risks related compared to, say, an opiate or a gabapentin. So I think part of the problem in pain medicine is that the view of, I suppose, the majority of my pain medicine colleagues is that there is insufficient evidence base from a randomized controlled trial perspective to support the efficacy of cannabinoids in chronic non-malignant pain. And I think that is essentially the elephant in the room. Doctors in the UK have taken a different approach to the evidence base compared to doctors elsewhere in the world. And I have had some interesting moments in meetings where I have suggested to my colleagues that they may be, dare I say it, rather arrogant in the way that they have looked at the evidence base and have applied a we know better than you approach. So I struggle with some of the approaches of colleagues. I approach the situation as follows, which is that the majority of people I've seen, or everyone I see in clinic, by sort of definition of them seeing me, are difficult to manage. So I don't see patients who have easy pain problems because they get sorted out by doctors that don't specialize in chronic non-malignant pain. So I see people with difficult problems, and I try and take a biopsychosocial approach to their problem, go back over everything, unpick a lot of stuff that has been told to them, which in my opinion was unhelpful, and then try and make sense of what is often a very messy medication history and current prescription menu, try and rationalize it and try and help people. So my perspective is that if you tried lots of different things and the pain is still intrusive into your life, then it's entirely reasonable for a number of indications, which would be pain and spasm related to MS, a central sensitization problem, a fibromyalgia, a very, very uncomfortable back post-surgery, post-failed surgery. I think it's entirely reasonable to try medical cannabis because, in my opinion, and I think this is a pretty solid opinion, it's very safe. So I don't like offering medical cannabis to kids unless there's a really, really important reason why they need to try it. Because I worry about the developing brain, and I think the brain stops developing about 35. I think your risk of a psychotic episode post 35 with a normal psychiatric history is low. And it then becomes a balance between the other risks that you take. Putting a spinal cord stimulator in you, which has nice guidance, is not without jeopardy. And certainly doesn't, certainly may well cause all sorts of side effects. People on tramadol get admitted for impacted feces. People on OxyContin, OxyNorm have all sorts of cognitive side effects with them. I see someone on gabapentin every week probably who thinks they should be in the memory clinic because of the effects on their cognitive function. So we're dealing with people that are on very complex and difficult to manage drugs who often don't get seen in a timely fashion to manage those medications. And my colleagues, I think, are broadly afraid of medical cannabis. I think that's also a factor here. They don't understand it. It's not like a thing where you just give someone a tablet. And that's part of the problem, is that the understanding of the dose and how you give it and the mixture and whether you are giving a flower or an oil and the percentage of THC, percentage of CBD, the different types of medication or different types of cannabis people struggle with, and everyone's on a learning curve. My experience with the Scriptus platform, which is something that I designed Scriptus platform from a medical perspective because I wanted to explain to people how to prescribe a difficult to manage substance. Okay, and if everyone in the country was using that platform for opioids and gabapentin, we'd have far fewer problems than we have. So I decided to sort of put forward what I thought was the best way to manage these molecules. And a part of the problem that I don't face when I prescribe medical cannabis is that I don't struggle with pharmacy issues. So if it's in the pharmacy and I click, prescribe, it's locked, and I know that my patient is going to get my prescription. And we have to do a wet signature here on left-10, so you have to sign that. But the digital prescription gets straight to the pharmacy, and as soon as my wet prescription gets there, it goes out to the client. So the weakest link in the chain is me. And I got an email today saying I haven't signed my FP10s from last week, and I hold my hand up. I had a tricky weekend, and I haven't done them yet, but they will go out. And I accept that the formulary that we're on is not every single medical cannabis product, but no one's going to be able to access everything. So you have to just work within the art of the possible within the formulary that you're working with. I would be concerned about saying to someone I can prescribe anything, because that's where you get into the difficulty of the supply chain. So there is a commercial thing here, in terms of what you can stock and what you can ship to people, and the importance of patients having a reliable and repeatable prescription of a product which seems to help them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of really good points there, particularly around what kind of how Scriptus can solve some of these issues from a kind of a supply chain point of view, but also from that stigma point of view. And the fact I thought it was really interesting, Ilan, how you mentioned that a lot of doctors are kind of scared of cannabis, and it's this new thing that doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's all these different products, there's all these different formulations, different ways of prescribing it. Obviously, vaping flower and using and using oils aren't really kind of natural to many clinicians in the pain sector. You imagine just kind of a neat, tidy white pill that can solve a lot of those issues. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of kind of education and awareness raising that needs to happen with clinicians.
When you speak to colleagues about the therapeutic window and the therapeutic index, they're very happy for patients to be taking paracetamol, where you could take 2,500 milligram tablets and be on the liver unit, and they're very happy prescribing. They have been very happy prescribing opiates, which are dreadfully easy to overdose on. And although you'd struggle to do yourself harm with gabapentin in terms of the overdose, it has pretty horrible side effects. So colleagues are very happy and comfortable prescribing drugs with narrow therapeutic windows, low numbers needed to harm, and low numbers needed to cause significant side effects. But when it comes to, there is something about cannabis which I think is because of the prohibition story, and because we haven't been doing research on it in the UK in the same way that it's been done in Israel or done in Canada and elsewhere in the world, in Australia, that we've got ourselves in the situation where, in Australia, as everyone's aware, GPs can prescribe it. So we've got ourselves into the situation where our routes of administration are a bit limited. We don't have THC pessaries easily available for ladies with pelvic pain and dyspareunia. We're happy with inadequate pain experiences for big parts of our population, and we've sort of settled with the fact that we're giving them opiates when we know that that's not helpful.
Yeah, and it's so incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly frustrating when medical cannabis, although it's not as stable as other medications, it's I think the side effect profile is significantly safer. I think a lot of us kind of would agree on that. But I'm aware of time, and I want to make sure that we have some time for questions at the end. I feel like we've discussed the kind of current tension points that exist for cannabis patients at the moment, and I thought it's always nice to offer some solutions and talk about the positives and kind of how we move forward. So it'd be great to hear from the panel around how do we ensure patient concerns and voices are heard? What steps are currently being taken in the industry, and how can we improve that patient experience? So Kieran and Sarah, I thought maybe it would be great to hear from you guys as patients on the ground doing loads of great work to educate and bring awareness. So yeah, what are you guys kind of experiencing on the ground now as ways that we can improve things, and yeah, what from your perspective could be done from the industry?
From my side of things, the main thing that patients are desperately wanting is some kind of like online stock list or portal, for each pharmacy. A lot of us are relying on sites like Medbud and things like that aren't, official. So, I'm not sure if things are in stock and whatever. So it would be great if for each different pharmacy we could log in and see what was available and what we can order, and we're not having to go on a random site and hope that it's in stock. We get a lot of people talking about that, don't we, Kieran?
Yeah, definitely. Personally, I think, in terms of solutions, I think in terms of the stigma, that one's just education. I think is just spreading the awareness and getting, the knowledge out there. It's like Dr. Alon says, they're not intentionally unaware, that they just are ignorant to it and it's not their fault. So I think we need to spread awareness and education, and that's what we're trying to do at the MCPA. But in terms of the other issues that we're facing, the supply chains and issues with clinicians not prescribing one item or something like that, or the stigma that we're facing specifically in the cannabis industry, I think we need a little bit more regulation. I think we need a little bit more support for patients in place. The only things that we've got is really the yellow card system, which is for adverse reactions that you've had to a medication when you've got ill, and then there's the CQC. But there's issues trying to just get a registration number or a name of a company to report those issues. But I personally think we need more guidelines in place for clinicians and clinics and pharmacies to know what it is that they need to do in certain situations to protect patients and ensure that they are treated fairly first, because it's on the onus of the business to do that for patients, and there's nothing really in place there for patients to have any kind of power or protection, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. I was just saying about with the yellow card scheme that, as patients, like when we come across issues, like myself, I was quite ill off a product. I can't prove that it was that product because there's no independent testing for patients. There's nowhere for me to go with a pot of my medicine and get it independently tested to prove that it is mold. Like, I'm an ex-grower. I used to grow on the black market. I know what mold looks like and different things like that. And, I've seen it with my eyes, and then it's been sent back to the clinic and I've been gaslit a bit about it. I've done yellow cards and nothing happens. So it's just like, as patients, like Kieran said, we feel like if the MHRA is overseeing all this, what are they actually doing, at the moment? Because as patients, we literally have no rights. We have to hope that people like Medcan and, other companies are doing the right things and do want the best by patients, because we have to just trust you at the minute. We can't, there's nothing else we can do. And it's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there needs to be sort of a buddy system, a support system for patients. That's what the MCP are trying to do, but I think there needs to be something officially there that's in support of patients first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's still so much so little information publicly available. Obviously, I think Medcan is a huge resource for a lot of patients. But yeah, you mentioned the MHRA. I think, even though it's a strictly regulated industry, I think some would argue there's still quite limited regulation in some regards, and a lot of stuff slips through, as Sarah's highlighted the issues with some of the medication that she's received. Yeah, I think there's still a lot to be done in that regard. Mikkel, is there anything that you'd like to kind of raise around what solutions we can take collectively as an industry to improve the patient experience overall?
Yeah, so from our point of view as a cultivator, our number one focus is just growing a really good product to deliver. That's like the first thing. So that's ignoring the industry. Let's say our job as a business, as a company, is to sort of cultivate a really good flower and make sure that it gets to the patient, and it's a product that patients want and that they can sort of reliably expect that every time that they get it, it will be good. So that's the one thing. And then the second thing, I think a lot of what I'm hearing and a lot of what I've seen over the years is it all comes down to visibility, I think. So I think visibility across the different clinics, pharmacies, the different channels for patients is very opaque, let's say. And so one of the things that we try to do at Medcan is just be as transparent as possible, and provide patients with different, if they want the information, we'll give them the information. And then behind the scenes, obviously, again, it's an industry, right? There are commercial incentives. So behind the scenes, we work almost on a daily basis to ensure that pharmacies know, hey, there's this product, it's called Isando, it's in stock. You don't have to order it in, but if your patient asks for it, you can get it. And so that's like a very big task on our shoulders, is to just make sure that everyone knows that it's available. You don't have to buy it necessarily, but that you can get it if a patient or a doctor asks about it. So yes, there may be delays in the supply chain because you're not holding it, but essentially we're just trying to make sure that people know. 2 years ago, we had a situation where we got told quite late that, the one Isando product was out of stock, but, we had the stock in Johannesburg, and we never want to be in a situation where patients are asking for a product and then they can't receive it, especially when we've got some, so we try to be, you can't be front-facing visible all the time, right? There's commercial decisions that need to take place. And so, but behind the scenes, we try to make sure that there's complete visibility between us and the different pharmacies, clinics, and then just making sure that, patients can rely on us, that the product's not going to go out of stock, that you can sort of, on a consistent basis, get it. We are a cultivator and things do happen, we run in cycles. So we do ask for a little bit of sympathy from that regard, but we do we do try to make sure that, you know, our product is consistent and always available, or mostly available when patients want it. And yeah. But
Yeah, I think
visibility,
that,
I think, is the big one.
yeah, I think visibility is so important because I think you have to spend hours to figure out who's attached to what, and you know, you end up with this like this mind map, like Charlie from It's Always Sunny, just with like darts everywhere. So I think that visibility and transparency is really, really important, and I think patients would appreciate that. So I think all the work that you're doing to just educate and put the word out there, Mikkel, is really important. And Ilan, I'll move on to you before we move on to some questions, as we've got a bunch of them open in the Q&A. But yeah, from your perspective, what can clinicians do to improve the patient experience? I guess from your perspective, are you, I guess, currently doing? What would you like to see from your colleagues to just continue to improve how medical cannabis patients receive their medication, and how this whole process is improved?
So I agree with Mikkel. I think that the real issue here is, even in the prescribing doctors, I think a bit more insight into how awful the journey can be after they've finished the consultation is required, and a bit more insight into how frustrating it is not to get the medication that you've said you're going to offer them. I suppose I can say this because I don't think my patients have this problem, is that I know that they're going to get the prescription that I've asked them to consider. But I'm well aware, because people have transferred over to me from other clinics, that that's not always the journey. So I would just say to clinicians, and I appreciate this isn't a clinician audience, but you know, I think what the point needs to be made, if you're going to work in a clinic and the supply side is tragic, then you need to think about which clinic you're working in. And it's not like a normal medical practice where you can just write a script and they can go to any pharmacy and get the medication. You know, it's not like prescribing venlafaxine and you go to any high street pharmacy and the venlafaxine is in the cupboard. So I think that's really important. That's an educational point for people to understand. And then, you know, even where we are, I mean, you know, I would like the pharmacy that I work with to have a bigger range. But as I said at the beginning, doctors shouldn't be involved in the financial aspects of the side of the industry. So that is problematic, definitely.
Yeah, I think the medical cannabis sector in the UK is unique to say the least. You know, I think it's quite different to medical cannabis markets across the world, and it's definitely different to just mainstream medical private healthcare practice in the UK. So I feel like there's still a lot of learning and, you know, processes that need to change as we kind of go further down along the patient journey. Now I'm aware of time, and we've got about, I think, 10 open questions on the Q&A. We'll try and get through as many as possible, but if there are any that are unanswered, maybe we can try and answer them over Twitter or at a later date. But yeah, so to start, I've got a question from an anonymous attendee to Mikkel and to Medcan. They say, thank you for posting the details of the terpenes and details of their medication. This is invaluable to patients. What would Mikkel say to any industry people listening who currently don't share this information?
Yeah, so testing is an interesting one. We're very fortunate that in South Africa, there's a few labs that had popped up around the time that we started cultivating and offered quite a robust suite of tests. So we're able to produce like a page long of terpenes, cannabinoids, like but 10 pages long of the different pesticides that we don't use. So we're very fortunate. I think I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that a lot of people that are not testing for these things are not testing because they're unable to, or there's a lack of testing infrastructure. I don't see why we're unable as an industry or as cultivators to provide patients with, you know, the list of terpenes, cannabinoids. But again, it comes down to, you know, are there, wherever the cannabis is grown, are there labs that can do the tests, and are the cultivators willing to share it? You know, if a cultivator has a bad batch and they don't want to share the details, that's also, it's up to them. I do think there's a question as well about regulation, whether you can or you can't share that information. And sort of where the line is. But us as a cultivator, we want to share as much information as we possibly can about the product. It's like, so that's our ethos. That's our sort of culture.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I've got another question for you, actually, Mikkel, around strains that have been. So this is a question from Rainy Day Cup of Tea, and they say there are a lot of strains that have been great for pain patients. However, strains come and go frequently. Is there any way for cultivators to take patient feedback and keep cultivating at least one popular pain strain so that pain patients don't get left in a difficult situation of being unable to manage pain whilst they can access the strain that has worked?
So that's a really tough one. I'll tell you, often what some patients think is working for them is not working for other patients. And so oftentimes, as a cultivator, we'll see, loads of people buying X strain or buying a Y strain, and then what someone thinks is working really well for them and the general population is not actually sort of working well. For us as a craft cultivator, it's very difficult. We're a very small team. We're a very small facility. And so we can't run, 5 different or multiple different strains at the same time. We sort of have to pick and choose and just sort of, there is an element of risk to it. I think I mentioned on the MCPA webinar a few days ago that for us to start a new strain from scratch the quickest it will take us is about 9 months. So it takes us from 0 to actually having a product that's available for sale about 9 months. So it's not that we decide overnight, hey, we're going to just start cultivating this and see what happens. It's a 9-month journey that we don't take that decision very lightly. Yes, obviously, as a cultivator, we would love to be able to say we're going to stick with this strain and we're going to continue because it's working for everybody. Doesn't work for everybody often, but we try to maintain the supply and say, so for example, the Tokoloshi sherbet that we're cultivating at the moment we've had very good feedback and we don't have any intention of taking that off the market anytime soon. So, but we will probably introduce something else to see if it works. But yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah, it doesn't come overnight. I can imagine that it's a lot of work. I've got a question again from Rainy Day Cup of Tea, but for Ilan. And they're asking, in terms of educating private doctors and NHS doctors, what current knowledge or education do prescribing doctors have in order to be able to prescribe? And is there any way for patients to provide helpful or useful knowledge to clinicians in order to help improve the experiences and combat stigma?
So in order to prescribe medical cannabis products, you need to have been on a training program. The training programs are not, I've run those in association with Scriptus. So the Scriptus programs are morning or afternoon, and it's pretty thorough. But it, like many things in medicine, it provides you with a basic background knowledge of the products and the way to prescribe them and the side effects and the indications, that sort of thing. But medicine is essentially an experiential and practical subject. So you then need to start prescribing to sort of learn the nuances of the medicine you're using. And so I think patients play a really important role in helping starting clinicians in understanding what they need. So I think when you're encountering a doctor and you're trying to explain to someone what works for you, it's really important to, I suppose, as a patient, find doctors that have sufficient humility to listen to the patients and understand their journey and try and understand what's worked for them. I think if you're in front of a doctor who won't take that on board, then unfortunately you can't educate the uneducatable, and you need to find a doctor that will listen to what you have to say. And there are lots of doctors out there that will, the majority will. So I think in answer to your question, patients have a very important part to play in explaining to their clinicians what they need and what's worked for them. Doctors build up an experience of medical cannabis prescription like they do with all other medications over time. And you only really get good at doing it by doing it. And I think that's part of the problem that we have in terms of scaling people that are prepared to prescribe, in that it's a very steep learning curve at the beginning, and it's a very difficult journey at the beginning, and it can feel quite intimidating because you are working as a single-handed practitioner, you aren't with lots of other colleagues in a clinic who are all doing similar work. You can't stick your head out the door and go, oh, I've got a problem with this, what do you think? Which is what you do normally. So it is difficult for people. I mean, I was certainly felt very intimidated when I first started. But you get the hang of it and you just have to start. And that first step, I think, is the biggest step for doctors when they begin the journey.
Yeah, and probably the scariest first step as well, but an important one. There's another question for you, Ilan, which I should have probably just combined the two, but someone's asking about, is there any readily available programs for doctors to take to allow them to be educated about cannabis? I feel like you've kind of already answered that. I know that Scriptosist runs some training sessions. I know the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society does as well. I think you guys do a lot of stuff in partnership. So yeah, I think that there are quite a lot of programs for doctors to get started.
I mean, it's really about the doctor wanting to do it. You know, the programs are out there. They're all either low cost or no cost. Most of them are, you know, Zoom type stuff. So there's certainly a lot of access for people if they want to do it. No question.
Yeah, it's about getting them over the line to attend the training sessions. Sarah, and I guess this is a question for Kieran as well. From an anonymous attendee, they're asking, what sort of problems are patients seeing with their medication? I think you may have mentioned some of this earlier in the webinar, but yeah, if there's any specific kind of occurrences that you can mention.
Main issues like with the medication is like either issues to do with how dry it is, the trim on it, or if there's like seeds. We have a lot of meds lately that are absolutely riddled with seeds, and like one of our main issues is that I know we go off like the European pharmacopoeia, but there's no clarification for patients. As like, you know, at the moment it says 2% foreign matter is allowed, but how much is that, you know, in a 10-gram pot? And you know, it's that's like one of our main issues at the minute, is saying to people, like, as a grower, when I encountered seeds, it was because either my plants were hermid, and then hermid with either, you know, just because, or it was due to heat stress or normal stress from the plants. And like when we're seeing like some batches that are absolutely riddled with them, it just makes us wonder, you know, how it's actually got through as medicine, because a lot of us have dexterity issues. I used to have a mechanical grinder because I couldn't use my hands properly. So I just ground all my flour as soon as I got it and put it in a jar, and it was just covered in seeds and I couldn't pick it out because it had peppered it all up. And I think for me, that's what we see a lot, is the seeds, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think Sarah's definitely touched on pretty much all I can think of when it comes to quality. When it comes to some of the other issues with products that I've seen patients mention recently, it would be terpenes. You know, there's patients that are allergic to certain terpenes or don't interact well with certain terpenes. There's patients that just know that there's certain terpenes that work for them, but they're not that available on the market at the moment. And it's, you know, I think great, we're getting more choice and stuff that's coming in. I think there definitely needs to be a you know, thought needs to be put into it in the patient's perspective of what is it that they need right now and what is it that's missing on the market, I think.
Yeah, I think it's just that acknowledgement that cannabis is really complicated as a medicine, and there's other markers that need to be put in place so that patients can get the full picture about each product. And I've got two questions from Medcan for Mikkel. So one question is, so for Medcan, potentially about the price compared to the competitors, and whether there's any intention to have the price reduced anytime soon. I know that you guys have made an announcement around price reductions. And then another question is around whether Medcan has considered exploring the clinical scene and doing it all in-house. And yeah, wondering if that's something that Medcan was considering. So yeah, two slightly different questions, but I thought.
Yeah, on the price, I'm not sure what I can and can't say according to the rules. So just go look on the social medias. You'll see that we have reduced our price recently by a significant amount. But on the second, The second question is a really good one, because we actually have done the mental exercise of, oh, hey, like what if Medcan started its own sort of clinic pharmacy? I think there are a lot of clinics out there that are doing a hell of a good job, and I don't think maybe patients disagree. I don't think there's the market needs another clinic, but just to give an understanding to the people who are watching this, what our thought process was okay, so Medcan will start its own clinic, but we're also a cultivator, and they'll both be like the same company. So obviously we would want to then prescribe our own flower, but if we're going to be prescribing our own flower, then no patient's going to want to come to us, because they're going to want the choice, like Dr. Ilan said. So we wouldn't be the greatest clinic. We wouldn't be able to be a really good clinic, because we would have this sort of bias to the fact that we're cultivating our own products. And so that was sort of the mental exercise that we did when we thought, okay, you know what, we'll just leave the clinic stuff to the clinics. And there's issues, there are issues, but I don't think those issues are like insurmountable. And I think we are still in the very early adopters phase of the medical cannabis space, and I think the clinics will eventually, at least the good ones, will iron out all these issues. Many of them are quite solvable, I think, in my opinion, through through very good implementation of technology, which I think some of them are starting to do. But yeah, that was kind of the mental exercise that we ran through, was we would be too biased as a clinic and a cultivator to sort of be giving the patient the best service that they need. And it would pain us to have to order in other products, even if the patient asked, because we would be a cultivator of our own product. So yeah, that was the exercise we did.
Guys have done all the calculations already, done the mind map.
Mental challenge, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess there's one other question for you, Mikkel. I'm aware of time, so I think we might not be able to answer all of them, but from an anonymous attendee, are there any issues or frustrations that cultivators have with the pharmacy system, and how do cultivators feel about the pharmacy model versus the dispensary model?
So don't quite know the difference between the dispensaries, in fact, that you can just walk in. I don't know if we'll ever get there in the UK. The dispensary model would be great in that the patients, I think similar like what happens in Israel, you get a prescription for, say, THC 20%, and you can walk into the pharmacy, and then the pharmacy will say, here's all the products that we've got, choose. Like this, it's your pick. You're not prescribed a specific product. You are prescribed sort of like an increment of THC that you can then use to get your product. So what do I think? I don't know. I don't think at the moment the UK is not. In my opinion, we're quite a far away from that. But what was the first part of the question, Katja? Sorry.
The first part of the question was, I've clicked answer on it.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I think it was whether you have any frustrations and issues with the pharmacy system in the UK.
Yeah, the frustration that we have as a cultivator, and I think many other cultivators will have this frustration, is that our product has a shelf life. You have to get rid of it within a certain amount of time, and it's very risky for the pharmacy to stock it. And so a lot of pharmacies will not stock the products in-house. They'll have to order them in-house, fine. But it leads to delays to the patient. It often leads to miscommunication by the pharmacy telling the doctor, or the doctor misinterpreting what the pharmacy is saying by saying it's out of stock when it's not out of stock. So that's really frustrating for us as a cultivator that's trying to get loads of patients access to our products. But we can also, on the other side, understand why it's happening. But there needs to be some smoothing out. Yeah, that's our biggest frustration.
Yeah, cool. I've got there's 3 questions, and I think we've got time to answer one of them. One of them's, I think, kind of already been answered, but I think this one's for Ilan, and I promise after this we'll finish. But an anonymous attendee said, I almost had no experience with cannabis when I started. While my clinic has supported me through the medical side of things, there's a lot of things, being a medical cannabis user, navigating venues, travel, vaporizers, etc. Actually, I think this might be a question for Sarah and Kieran on second thought. Everyone can answer it if they'd like. So where there's only some support from clinics, the majority of what I know I've learned from online community members, but I only found that by actively seeking it out. Are there ways that clinics, or I guess anyone, could better help support patients who are new to cannabis? And how do you see the future of medical cannabis communities supporting new patients? Well, excellent question. I feel like that's a really good question to end on. So I don't know if all of you have thoughts that you'd like to share, or it's just Sarah and Kieran that would like to feed in. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to talk a bit about the MCPA, because that's kind of what we do. You know, we want patients to go in informed and also be informed the whole process like we have regular Zooms. We have one on a Wednesday, which is our Wednesday meeting. We have Vape and Chill on a Friday at 2 and a Vape and Chill on a Sunday at 2, where you can sit, use your vaporizer, someone will help you, show you how to use it and talk about it. And we all just sit, vape our medicine and talk. And that's basically what our Discord is. It's a massive learning experience for everybody. And it's not just limited to patients. Clinicians can join and ask questions, speak to patients if they want to, anonymously. We don't have to declare exactly who everybody is. And it's a space for us all to learn and educate about medical cannabis, because, when people come in, like my sister has just joined as a patient, and she said, if I didn't know you, I don't think I'd know anything, what to do or what to order, because when I have my appointment, he just says, what do you want? And I guess it's like, because of the MCPA, I feel like so many more patients are informed now, and we can actually talk about things, that it's just a good space. And the MCPA is also working on the Normalise It campaign, where we'll be contacting venues all over the country to, will you put this sticker in your window that says you support medical cannabis patients to use their medication in your venue, in your premises. And then we want that to spread, across the whole of the UK. So there's venues everywhere that actively want to support patients that are approaching us, hey, can I have this sticker in my window? And we just want to normalise it. Literally, that's all we need to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you guys are doing amazing work to just help patients navigate the complexity that is medical cannabis, and being there for patients, having the Discord, having a bunch of resources for patients to access. I am very aware of time. I know we've gone 2 minutes over. I don't know if there was anything else that Ilan and Mikkel wanted to add, but I feel like Sarah's kind of summed up that question really nicely. I feel like anyone that's on the call that isn't aware of the MCPA, you should definitely check out their website. They're doing some great work, and doing lots to support patients. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining. It's been a really, really interactive webinar. It's always good to get loads of questions. You're always worried you're like reserving 20 minutes and you're like, oh, I hope there's enough questions. So I'm sorry that we didn't get to answer 2 of them. But yeah, thank you everyone for taking their time out this evening. Thank you to our panelists for their excellent contributions, and yeah, I hope that you guys have found it a useful event.